Joining us now on the phone is Behnam Ben Taleblu. He is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Behnam Ben, thank you so much for talking to us about this. You're really an expert when it comes to this area, and hopefully you can tell us your thoughts on the situation as a whole, just right out of the gate here.
Sure, it's my pleasure. Look, this is quite busy breaking news day for the government of the Islamic Republic, because it wasn't just Iranian President Raisi, but several other officials in the helicopter as well, including Iran's current foreign minister, Amir-Abdollahian, who had joined President Raisi on the trip to Azerbaijan to inaugurate their third joint dam between Baku and Tehran on the border there. On the way back, what's been reported, at least through official sources in Iran, is that dense fog impeded the chopper's path, and in the relatively mountainous terrain of Iran's East Azerbaijan province, there was a quote-unquote hard landing, which now looks essentially to be a crash. You even have semi-official Iranian government sources on Twitter showing, the drone rescue team trying to identify signs of life, and they don't see any. Someone like Raisi in Iran's political apparatus is replaceable. The Iranian presidency is not at all like the presidency in France or the presidency in America or the prime ministership in some other countries. He carries out, implements, and executes policies that do come from above. Nonetheless, it was one of, you could say, the most, if not one of the most hardline administrations in the history of the government of the Islamic Republic, and Raisi oversaw one of the most sanctioned cabinets in the history of the government of the Islamic Republic. If indeed, as it's now looking, the first Vice President Mohammad Mokhber does replace him, he too is sanctioned by the United States of America. So there is an ultra hardline elite at the helm that just got somewhat smaller.
You say that he was sanctioned by America. How does this affect the relationship? I mean, if there is a relationship, how does this affect us with Iran?
Well, now I think it's a time for moral clarity. Ebrahim Raisi is someone who has failed upwards in his career in the government of the Islamic Republic. He was 29 years old when he sat on this thing called the Death Commission at the end of the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, where he implemented fatwas that basically were designed to provide legal cover to basically kill political prisoners. Thousands of political prisoners died at this man's hand. This man was at the judiciary in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, when Iran witnessed massive nationwide protests that led to the government killing 1,500 protesters in the course of several weeks. This man has had blood on his hands for many, many years, and he has been promoted, as I mentioned, failing upwards into more important political positions in the government of the Islamic Republic, not because of his competence, not because of his capability, but because of his loyalty and zeal. And for purposes of U.S.-Iran relations, as you know, the Iranian president doesn't set foreign policy. That comes from other institutions, other sources. Mm-hmm. So it's highly likely that the regime is going to essentially remain on the same anti-American, anti-Israel, anti-status quo course as it was before.
I mean, how long would something like this take as far as a replacement for him? I know we were talking to Dan Hoffman earlier, and it's kind of up in the air. You don't really know. But like we said, the Iranian state media, they're reporting that the foreign minister was also on that chopper. But you say that all these people are essentially just answering to the supreme leader. So what's their point in having all of these positions if they just have to answer to that one person?
Well, indeed, there's no shortage of parallelism, dualism, and indeed redundancy in the Iranian system. Again, this is not at all a democratic political system. Mm-hmm. It is an authoritarian political system where Iran's current supreme leader, and that's a title meant to be taken quite literally, is the Middle East's longest-serving autocrat to date. He's lived longer than many of his political rivals whom he has killed or exiled or to put into jail. And he is the one who has had ultimate power in that country without much accountability. And when talking about that person, that supreme leader, it's important to note he's an octogenarian. Last month, he turned 85 years old. Lots of Iran's political and religious elite are quite old. And indeed, one reason why Raisi would matter is because he was assumed by many independent and foreign experts to be on the short list to replace Iran's current 85-year-old supreme leader should that individual die. But now with the highly likely passing of Ebrahim Raisi, that short list just got a lot shorter and is likely to include the supreme leader of Iran's son, Mojtaba Khamenei.
You know, I have a question as far as Gaza and what's happening in Gaza and with Israel. Does this affect that situation in that part of the Middle East at all?
I don't believe so, but I will say this. You know, again, I don't believe so because the presidency doesn't set foreign policy. He merely implements it. He does a lot of, the presidency is in charge of the stylistic side, not the substantive side of Iranian foreign policy. There's a whole lot more that he does control and can impact, both with laws, regulations, and even speeches on the economic and social front versus the foreign policy front, where that's really the purview of others. But nonetheless, when it comes to Iran's anti-Israel and anti-American disposition, this is stuff that is preset. But this regime, because we know it's so weak at home, sometimes when it's super weak at home, it likes to feign strength or project strength abroad. So it's no shock in my mind that the region is on high alert, not just Israel and the Arab world based on the post-October 7th Middle East, but because they're watching and waiting to see how this kleptocratic regime in Iran might respond, and if they try to flex their muscles publicly at a time when they know they're looking at home.
And as far as on the home front, on American soil, you know, how could this affect us? You know, I asked this question earlier for the average American sitting at home watching this, you know, in middle America at 12:40 on a Monday morning. I mean, why should this matter to them?
Essentially, this should matter because there is a massive chasm inside Iran, and that chasm is not among the musical chairs that you're about to see on TV when and if Raisi is replaced. The massive chasm is between state and society. One reason why you've had rolling coverage all day is because the government in Iran has not officially confirmed Raisi's death, just like they were very slow to report on the chopper being downed and very slow to report on the rescue teams to come and find him.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but before you finish with that, you say they were slow to get to that. Why is that? Are they just trying to cover everything up, or do they just not want anybody to know?
I think one very shorthand answer is, you know, there were a lot of problematic conditions, a lot of fog, and they're generally unprepared. But B is they are trying to cover everything up. And the reason they're trying to cover everything up is the vast majority of the population inside that country opposes them. And that's what matters for the average American. That's what matters to the average voter. Because the Middle East, as you know, is a quite precarious place. And ironically, Iran, that has one of the most anti-American governments, has one of the most pro-American populations. So now is indeed the time for moral clarity and strategic clarity for a renewed American policy of pressure against the regime and support for the people in that country. No more of this kind of two-step private diplomacy that the Biden administration has been engaging in. No more relaxing sanctions for the government of the Islamic Republic to continue to generate revenue that supports a terrorist apparatus that threatens Americans, that threatens coalition forces, that threatens America's friends and partners and allies in the region, like Israel, like the moderate Arab states. Now is the time for moral clarity and for a rehaul. Sadly, I don't think the Biden administration will be doing that.
What do you think the Biden administration is doing right now with this news coming out?
Well, most unfortunately, just a few days before this news coming out, there was a story, I believe, in Axios talking about the administration, again, looking to try to use private diplomacy with regional intermediaries to try to talk about, you know, tamping down prospects for regional escalation. The problem with this approach is that, A, it hasn't yielded fruit in the past, and B, every time you go to a government, which is a government like the one that is in Iran, which is the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism, that chants death to Israel, death to America. Mm-hmm. And these guys indeed mean what they say, and they've spent the country's national treasure and resources towards acting on what they have been saying for so long. They will take you for a ride. They've taken America to the cleaners on the nuclear deal well in the past under the Obama administration, and indeed now they're benefiting from this laxed American posture towards Iran, particularly with the unenforced oil sanctions, which gives this regime revenue to do all the bad things it does in the Middle East, as well as the repression of its own population at home. And the approach by the Biden administration of trying to calm them down or reach out and try to feign friendship or try to reach out a hand of friendship here is that it ends up projecting weakness and ironically will underwrite the next cycle of escalation that neither us nor our partners in the region can afford.
Well, Behnam Ben, thank you so much for all of your insight on this. This is just a breaking story, obviously. This has been unfolding over the course of several hours, but we're just now hearing from Iranian state media that there's no there's no sign of life with this chopper that went down. So we do appreciate you staying up late with us early this morning on Monday morning. We do appreciate your time.